Welcome to a virtual meeting of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea's Licensing Subcommittee, and thank you for attending. I'm Councillor Charles Williams and I'll be chairing this meeting. It is being held via Microsoft Teams and is also being streamed live. The committee for this hearing comprises myself and Councillors Spalding and Healy. Councillors, could you please introduce yourselves? Councillor Healy? Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Pat Healy. I represent Dalgarno Ward. I have no conflict of interest in this hearing.
Good morning, Chairman. Councillor Malcolm Spalding, Earls Court Ward.
Thank you. And we're also joined remotely by Sharon Diebold and Paul Phelan from the Council's licensing team and our legal officer Heidi Titcombe. And with us also is our committee officer Isabel Saunders. Isabel will be monitoring all our connections and help with technical issues we may have, and she is supported by Yasmin Yama and Leonie Hill. Before we start the hearing for this case, just a few ground rules. Please keep your microphones on mute until you are invited to speak, and please make sure mobile phones are on silent. Everyone should have received the procedure for this meeting regarding the use of cameras and how to connect back if you lose the connection. Right, the case before us is an application to grant a new licence for Ruby Hotel 146 to 154 Notting Hill Gate W11. Declarations of interest, Councillor Healy has already declared. I will state I have no interest to declare. I do know Mrs. Everett as a former member of the council, but I have not discussed this matter with her. Councillor Spalding, any interest?
No declaration of interest, Chairman.
I also think any other councillor present, and I think that's Councillor Schmetterling. Do you have any interest? Oh, right, well, we can return.
Sorry, yeah, I've unmuted myself. No, as an objector, I don't have any financial or other such interest in this application. I'm an objector, and I had previously been in touch with Frogmore to consider the planning application.
Right. Thank you very much. Next matter is election of a substitute chair. The quorum for this committee is 2, as there's always the possibility that I may lose a connection temporarily during the broadcast. I'm nominating Councillor Spalding to be appointed as the substitute chair. Please confirm whether this nomination is seconded. Councillor Healy? I take that as assent.
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
Thank you. I confirm that Councillor Spalding has been appointed the substitute chair. Thank you. For clarity, I will briefly outline the procedure of the meeting, but again, this has been circulated with the papers. First, the licensing officer, Ms. Diebold, will give a brief outline of the application. Could you confirm that you're here, Ms. Diebold?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I'm here.
I will then ask the applicant's legal advisor, Mr. Bayliss, to present his submission. He will have a maximum of 10 minutes to do so. Mr. Bayliss, can you confirm your attendance?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm here.
Right. And then the members of the committee may ask questions of the applicants, and also the objectors may be able to ask questions, maybe if they wish to ask questions of the applicants for up to 5 minutes each. Next, the objectors will be able to present their submissions for a maximum of 10 minutes each. And after we've heard from all of them, we may ask questions of you, and Mr. Bayliss may. And I would just actually like to ask if those the objectors can confirm their appearance. They are here, and we know Councillor Schmetterling is here. Miss Everett?
Yes, Chairman. Joanna Everett here.
Thank you.
I think in terms of running order, we were suggesting Sebastian starts first, Sebastian Pearson.
Yeah.
Then myself, then Mrs. Johnson.
Yes.
Then followed by Councillor Spalding. Oh, sorry, Councillor Schmetterling.
Okay, that's all right. I'll just make a note of that. Just hold on. Got my attendance here. Right. Can Mr. Pearson and is Mr. Deal here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm either Jane Deal or Mrs. Johnson. Take
Right.
your pick.
Right. And finally, Mr. Pearson is here, is he?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair. Representing Victoria Gardens.
Yes, right. Could I just confirm the preferred order for the objectors to speak? So it's firstly Pearson, followed by, is it Everett?
Correct.
Then
Followed by Deal, followed by
the councillor. Okay, that's fine then. Right. Let's see if any more. Finally, after this, we will ask our legal officer, Ms. Tickham, to deal with any questions she may have regarding conditions. Then we will turn to the governance team to see if any issues have been raised in the chat box that we will need to consider. And there will be no summing up. The meeting will end. And I would like to remind everyone the committee has read the papers. There's no need to repeat their content, but please do draw attention to certain points. Right. Ms. Dybel, please could you now outline the case for us, confirm whether there have been any additional papers?
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask a point of clarification? Do we all at the end just leave and you send us your written decision? Or
that is correct, and perhaps Ms. Tickham could explain what the procedure we're now having to adopt.
Yes, thank you. So at the end of the hearing, after all the parties have spoken, the meeting will close. The members will then retire into private session to make their decision, and we hope to be able to confirm a summary decision to all the parties within 5 working days.
Thank you. Right. Ms. Dybel.
Thank you. Good morning. This application is made by Ruby Hospitality UK Limited for the grant of a premises licence for a new hotel development at 146 to 154 Notting Hill Gate for the sale of alcohol on and off the premises on Monday to Friday from 7 AM until 11 PM, Saturday and Sunday from 8 AM until 11 PM, and for 24 hours for hotel residents and their bona fide guests. The plans submitted with the application, which are on pages 20 and 21 of the committee papers, show the licensed area as the ground floor, which will be open to both hotel guests and non-residents. Any sales for consumption outside of this area, including to the hotel bedrooms, would be considered an off-sale. The applicant has agreed to a condition that the off-sales of alcohol shall be limited to supplies to hotel guests in their bedrooms. The applicant has suggested a number of other conditions which are included in the committee papers at pages 16 to 19 of the committee report. 9 representations have been received opposing the application, and this includes objections from Councillor Schmetterling, the Bulmer Mews Residents Association, Hillgate Village Residents Association, the Ladbroke Association, the Pembridge Association, and 4 local residents. A summary of the objections can be found on pages 2 to 5 of the committee report, and copies of the objections are included at Appendix C to the report at pages 22 to 37. Additional submissions were received from Councillor Schmetterling and the Ladbroke Association, and these were circulated to all parties yesterday. No representations have been received from responsible authorities. The proposed hotel is part of a larger redevelopment of the block of Notting Hill Gate, which extends from numbers 146 to 164. The site is currently occupied by a number of retail outlets, including the Marks and Spencer's food store, which extends from 146 to 152 Notting Hill. As the property address of this site is not currently listed on our property database, we have registered the application against the nearest matching address, which in this case is 146 to 152 Notting Hill Gate, and we've noted in the comments that the proper address is in fact 146 to 154 Notting Hill Gate. I understand that this may have caused some confusion, and I would like to apologise to this. I don't have anything else to add at this stage, unless there's any questions from any parties.
Sorry, could I just ask you to reread out what the applicant had offered about hotel sales? Bedrooms?
Ms. Dibold?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, could you please repeat the piece about what the applicant has offered about the hotel bedrooms?
So the applicant has agreed to a condition that the off sales of alcohol shall be limited to supplies to hotel guests in their bedrooms.
So does that mean they don't want anything outside of the premises?
Perhaps we can seek clarification during the hearing of that. Right. I suggest now that we hear from Mr. Bayliss, the applicant's representative. And Mr. Bayliss, I think it would be quite helpful if you could explain to us, because as you hear that there has been a little bit of confusion about the numbers. What I would like to know in particular is the area for which the license is being applied. Is it effectively the footprint of the present Marks and Spencers, and do will the bedrooms of the hotel extend beyond that over what are presently the adjoining shop units? It'd be helpful if you could explain that. But anyway, the floor is yours, Mr. Bayliss.
Chair, very helpful. Thanks very much. I'm not going to put my camera on because I don't look my best at home this time in the morning, but hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Can I just preface my remarks by saying that I had a very helpful conversation yesterday with Councillor Schmetterling, and we discussed a lot of the issues that he raised in his paper objections. You will, of course, eventually be taking advice from Heidi in relation to the legal position, but I was at pains to point out to Mr. Schmetterling that a lot of the concerns raised by the residents relate cross purposes to planning issues, and of course licensing has nothing to do with planning, and so I am anxious that we don't cover any of the issues raised in the planning approval at this hearing, because they are completely separate and different issues. We're concerned primarily with the license application. In terms of the address and the site itself, Chair, my understanding is it does cover the Marks and Spencer's footprint. That the whole block is being redeveloped is my understanding. And one of the reasons, Sharon apologises for the confusion about the address, but one of the reasons for confusion is because we don't have an address yet. We're so far away from actually even starting work here. We're 3 years away from this development. So the post office hasn't given us an address. So with the best one in the world, I've had to guess an address, and I've tried to identify the site as best I can by using the current numbers at Notting Hill Gate. So that's the reason. But I think we all know pretty much what we're talking about and the site that we're talking about. In terms of the site itself, there was a question, and let me clarify this for Councillor Schmetterling once more. There was a question about why we're applying so early when we're not even going to start work on site for 2 or 3 years. The simple legal reason for that is that our contract, the hotel owner's contract with the developers Frogmore, is that they are required contractually to apply for a licence as soon as they've exchanged contracts. And so we exchanged contracts some time ago, and so we had to lodge the application immediately. And so that's the reason that the application comes early. And I don't hesitate in saying that it is likely, maybe 12 months, maybe 18 months down the road, that there will be changes to the plans or changes to the layouts in some way or other. But at this stage, the plan that we're using and the application that we're making is what is currently proposed. The company is a German hotel company. They have about 10 or 15 hotels in Germany, and they're just starting a foray into the UK. They have one hotel already in the UK, down in Waterloo. This will be their second. I've got them a license elsewhere. There's one in Camden, and we've got another one which is in the process of going forward near Elephant and Castle. So they're very active in terms of development. They're what I would describe as a mid-range, mid-market hotel operator. Bedroom prices, depending on location, tend to be around 170 to £200 a night. This will be a 150-bedroom hotel. And as Sharon's already pointed out, the only licensed area for this hotel is the ground floor itself. There is no licensed area anywhere else. I think one of the objectors has some concerns about a rooftop bar. There are no plans for a rooftop bar. The only area that will be licensed is the ground floor area. You will have seen from the application that, as is standard practice for all hotels, we've asked for 24-hour licensing for the hotel residents and their guests. Standard hours for the bar for non-residents, because we do expect the bar to attract non-residents, both as a restaurant and as a bar. And we've asked for 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. as standard hours for non-residents. Food in the morning, so no alcohol without food before 10 o'clock for non-residents. For some reason, I'm not quite sure why, there's been a lot of confusion about off sales. I made it clear in the application itself. Condition 9 in the original application says off sales are only for bedroom guests. I've clarified that later on in emails. I'll say it again now. No one will be able to take alcohol outside the building. Condition 10 on the schedule that I've submitted with the original application says no drinks or glassware shall be taken outside. So you can't even take a soft drink outside, never mind alcohol. And that's been clear from the outset. So the on-sales area is the ground floor. If a guest wants to buy a drink in the bar or have it delivered by room service, then that's an off-sales facility, and that will be taken to their room. The very helpful discussion I had with Councillor Schmettling yesterday also raised the issue of deliveries and collections. I know that's always a thorny issue for residents. Following my conversation with Councillor Schmettling yesterday, I had a conversation with the chief exec at the hotel yesterday in Germany. He was hoping to be on this Zoom meeting, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. But I've run that past him, those issues in relation to deliveries and collections. He has no concern whatsoever about allowing me to offer a condition which says there will be no deliveries or collections to or from the hotel after 7:30 p.m. in the evening or before 7:30 in the morning. They do need deliveries around 7:30 in the morning, primarily for breakfast goods, things which they don't make on site, so milk, pastries, that type of thing. But no deliveries or collections before 7:30 and no deliveries or collections after 7:30 in the evening. If you want that as a condition, I'm very, very happy to give that to you. I don't think there's anything else I need to say at the moment. I think I'll leave it for questions that I can clarify in terms of how the matter is going to move forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bayliss. The first question was, I mean, it was raised by Councillor Schmettling, but are we right in thinking that a part of the area you're seeking a licence for as part of the hotel was in the planning consent granted for retail use?
I don't know, Chair. I wasn't privy to the planning application. I'm the licensing lawyer, not the planning lawyer, so okay. I don't know. The plan that I lodged was the plan that I was given. So when the clients came to me and said, we want to make an application for a license, I said, I need a plan to do that. And the plan you have is the plan I was given.
Right. Now, my next question is, why have you not applied for a license for the whole hotel so that consumption of drinks in the bedroom would be therefore covered by the on license?
It's you're quite right, that is a possibility. In my experience, applying for a license for the whole hotel tends to give residents even more jitters than the way I've done it, because they start thinking that you're going to be having bars on every floor, or, as I think one resident has expressed concerns, bar on the rooftop. So I try and limit the area of on sales as much as I can to purely the ground floor area, because there's no need to have the bedrooms licensed if you're just going to have room service or guests taking their drinks to the rooms themselves. The only time I would normally apply for an on-licence for the bedrooms as well is if they had minibars in them, and this company doesn't bother with minibars.
Right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that point. Can I ask Councillors Healy and Spalding, do you have questions?
Chairman, I've got one brief question. Looking at the diagram of the licensable area in yellow on the screen at the moment, I notice at the back of the building there are some steps and a doorway that leads into the little roadway at the back. Is there any plan to control the egress of patrons for smoking or potential drinking in that pavement at the back of the premises?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point. I should have raised it myself earlier. It's purely a fire exit. I raised the issue yesterday with the chief exec of the hotel company, and again, he's happy to offer a condition that no member of the public or hotel guest will be allowed into that area. I don't quite know how you define the area. You could call it the back passage, if you excuse my French, or you could call it the rear entry. But however you want to define it, if you want a condition that says people won't be allowed into that area, I'm happy to offer it. In terms of smoking, smokers will always be directed to the front of the hotel onto Notting Hill Gate.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Healy?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. I'd like to clarify, sorry, there was a bit of a disturbance when Mr. Bayliss was speaking. I'd like to clarify one issue. Has the original application to allow alcohol sales to hotel residents and their bona fide guests, has the bona fide guests been dropped? Is it now only intended to apply for hotel residents themselves?
No, I don't think so. I think that's still part of the application. It would be a normal course of events for a hotel license to allow residents and their bona fide guests to drink 24 hours.
Okay, can you tell me then what a bona fide guest is?
What's a bona fide guest in a hotel? Well, if I'm staying at the hotel and I'm a businessman and I'm having a business meeting which goes on until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning with people, I might want to have a drink with them. So they'd be my bona fide guests. I can think of other situations that probably aren't as quite Snow White as to why I might want someone else in the hotel with me, but that's the normal sort of expectation, that people who are attending meetings or are guests of a hotel resident are entitled to the same hospitality.
Fine, thank you.
Right. Are there, Ms. Tickham, do you wish to ask any questions?
Thank you, Chair. I can deal with the question of conditions at the end, or would you prefer me to deal with it now?
Probably prefer to deal with that a little later, I think.
Okay, lovely, that's fine.
Right. I wonder if the objectors would like to ask any questions of Mr. Bayliss.
Yes,
would you say who you are if you're speaking?
I can confirm Jane Johnson and Jane Everett have raised their hand to ask questions.
Right. Okay.
As has Sebastian Pearson.
Right. Well, would Mr. Pearson like to go first?
Sure, yes. I mean, my question to the bona fide guests is, business meetings going on at 1 o'clock in the morning sounds, it's relatively unlikely. I don't understand why guests would need access to alcohol at 1, 2, 3 in the morning to be able to. I'm assuming that's not for consumption on the ground floor, it's only for consumption in the rooms. Is it correct, Mr. Bayliss, that that's the case?
No, it could be for consumption on the ground floor. If I'm a businessman and I'm having a long business meeting, perhaps in the restaurant with a client or with some potential investors, and we have a late dinner and it goes on till maybe 12 or 1 in the morning, I don't see any reason why those people shouldn't be allowed to have a glass of wine with their dinner as the meeting finishes.
But that's the problem I have is 24 hours means that potentially this is a drinking haven, which doesn't exist anywhere in the area, in a residential area as well, for alcohol consumption and people to drink all night long on that whole ground floor area. And that creates all sorts of potential public nuisance issues in the local neighbourhood.
I'm not sure that's a question I can answer. I mean, the hotel is a 150 bedroom hotel. They will not want people in the lounge disturbing their guests who are staying in the hotel all night and having troubled sleep.
Well, then there's no need to apply for a 24/7 drinking licence.
I'm not sure I can answer that question, Chair. It's an absolutely standard condition for all hotels to have 24-hour licenses for residents and bona fide guests. I don't know of a hotel that doesn't allow that.
Well, I've never stayed in a hotel that allows people to drink all night long in the hotel lobby, or,
Right. Do you have any further comment, Mr. Bayliss?
Chair, no.
No. Right. Any further questions from Mr. Pearson?
I'll raise the rest of my questions when I speak.
When you speak, right. Fair enough. Who would next like to ask a question?
I believe, sorry, it's Joanna Everett here. I believe Mr. Pearson has actually already asked the exact question I was going to ask. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask two questions?
That's Jane Deal, is it?
That's right, Jane Deal or Jane Johnson. Yeah.
Right.
Two questions. The licensable area on the ground floor, in the pack, the ground floor that's being shown, the area extends to the west to where the retail unit is meant to be. Is that correct? Are they applying for the license to be right out to the west end of the hotel, where under planning it was meant to be a retail unit? That's one of my questions. My other question is, you've spoken to the CEO about the hours for deliveries and collections, and you have said nothing after 7:30 p.m. or before 7:30 a.m. You haven't mentioned whether there's going to be any weekend respite. Am I correct in assuming you intend doing 12 hours a day, 7 days a week?
To answer your first question, I don't know anything about retail units. I don't know anything about the planning. This is the licensing plan that I was given to submit, and so the plan that you have before you is the plan that is submitted to the Committee for Licensing purposes. In terms of deliveries and collections, my instructions are to offer a cut-off time at 7:30 every day of the week, and no deliveries before 7:30 in the morning, Monday to Friday, and 8 a.m. Saturday and Sunday.
Then, just to follow up on that, your licensable area extends to 164 Notting Hill Gate.
But the licensable area is shown on the plan. I don't know where 164 is personally.
Well, what's shown on the plan goes all the way up to the block of flats next door, which my reading of the road map is that goes to 164.
Right.
And that's not what this application is meant to be for. It's meant to be up to 154.
The premises as yet don't have a postal address. I think I made that clear at the outset. So the plan that you have is the plan which is applied for in respect of the licensable area for the new build hotel, whatever address it may have in future.
Yes, but the point, sorry, this is Sebastian Pearson, the point made is that west area is meant for a retail unit, therefore there shouldn't be a license being applied for that portion of the building.
Well, you're speaking about planning, Mr. Pearson. This is a license hearing. Planning's got nothing to do with this.
Yes, Heidi Tickham, do you wish to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, Mr. Bailey is correct that the application before the members is as set out on the plan. I know there have been issues raised about whether this application complies with the planning application. The question as to whether it does comply with the planning application is one for the planning authority, because this licensing authority is entitled to determine this application. And if residents think that the premises will not be built in accordance with the planning permission, they do need to raise that with the planning authority, who can of course investigate and, where appropriate, take enforcement action. It's not really a matter that this committee should be considering, because they have to determine the application before it. I hope that clarification assists.
Thank you.
Can I help Heidi as well in relation to this issue? I raised it with the chief exec yesterday on the call. We are 3 years away from this hotel opening. It is highly likely that the layout plans will change, and we will have to come back to committee for a variation of the plans at some point in due course as negotiations with the planning department continue. I can't give you a stronger steer than that, but those are my instructions yesterday.
Yes, thank you, Craig. I mean, it is entirely normal for developers to go back to the planning authority and make applications to amend their plans. So they could obviously do that between now and 3 years. The one issue I might ask Ms. Dybel to comment on is the numbering of the premises. I'm just wondering whether it should actually be more than 154. I just wondered, I mean, it may not be possible to determine that at the moment if it has no address, but I just wondered if Ms. Dybel had any view on that.
Thank you. We've gone by the address that was in the application form. I mean, the block at the moment is numbered, the whole block is numbered up to 164. Whether the numbering will change when the premises are developed, we don't know.
Right, thank you. Further questions?
Sorry, yes, Joanna Everett here. Could I just ask a couple of questions? Could Mr. Bayliss actually talk us through the yellow highlighting on that floor plan, please? When you come in, is that a reception or is that a bar in front of you where it says main entrance?
Yep, I can see that. So as you walk into the main entrance, the area that's marked main entrance, straight in front of you, there's a bar counter, a bar servery. This particular hotel chain doesn't operate a formal reception type area. So if you go to, I've been to the one in that they opened in Waterloo about 6 or 8 months ago. And when you walk in, you've got quite a few members of staff walking around with big iPads, greeting people as they come in. And it's a sort of a floating reception practice, really. So you walk in, and as soon as you walk in, one of the staff comes up to you and says, "Hello, are you just here for a drink and something to eat, or are you checking in?" And if you're checking in, then you get taken to one side and sat down. They take your details on the iPad, and then off you go to your room. But most of the area is laid out as coffee, bar, restaurant, dining. You can see the various tables and chairs laid out there throughout the premises.
Can I just ask, do you actually formally have a restaurant?
My understanding is that as you walk in through the main entrance, all of that area to the right-hand side, laid out as tables and chairs, is restaurant, as it goes around the sort of L shape around the back.
Yep.
And so to the left-hand side, the areas which I think you think are currently earmarked for planning purposes as retail, I think those are likely, well, they're currently shown as seating areas for coffee and for the bar itself. If they are to become retail, I suspect they will become coffee bar type areas as opposed to anything else. Again, without giving you too hard a steer on what's going to happen in the future.
Okay, and can I just clarify your comments about deliveries and takeaways at the rear? Does that also include the disposal of rubbish at the rear?
Yes. Yes. No bottling out after 7:30.
Okay, I have to admit, I would say that I think from the perspective of residents, the 10 a.m. start on Sunday is invaluable. It's the only day of the week we actually get a sleep in. I'm sure we'll raise this later, but I would merely just say if you can offer something on a Sunday, in particular, that would be very, very welcome. Okay. No further comments. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Schmetterling.
Thank you. Right. It would take a few seconds to react. Councillor Schmetterling, Pembridge Ward. I suppose most of what I'll have to say will come into the
this is a question
section. So the questions I have basically is if Mr. Bayliss could please comment on the back door from the basement and what that bike store is, whether that's a public bike store or just for members of staff. So is that back door on the basement accessible will it be closed to residents? And also the next question is when Mr. Bayliss spoke to Mr. Strock, who I'm disappointed to see is not here, about the hours, did he actually mention the hours that we proposed? The delivery and bottling out hours, because it strikes me from his comments that he hadn't, but maybe he has, and I'd like to just make sure that he did ask that question. So that's question 2. I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, the bike store, as I understand it, is purely for staff and not for anybody else. It's not a public store. So again, I want to emphasise there is no anticipated activity anywhere at the rear of the property at all for members of the public or anyone else. In terms of the hours for deliveries and collections, yes, I mentioned your suggestions to Mr. Stuck. The difficulties in terms of having anything later than 7:30 in the morning, as I think I've already mentioned, is they do need deliveries every day for breakfast goods. So milk, pastries, that type of thing to service the restaurant. So, but he was happy to say nothing earlier than 7:30. I think they can probably live with that.
Yes, I just wonder, do you think if Mr. Struck would know about the beeping lorries when they reverse, they come and make a lot of noise, and just where that hotel is not only near Bulmer Mews, but is he aware of the geography of Victoria Gardens, the very quiet cul-de-sac, which is right behind the hotel, and of course, Gatehill Court next door? Thank you.
Okay.
Is he aware? That was a question.
I'm sorry.
That's a question.
No,
did you make him aware of the geography?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't make him aware, Councillor Schmetterling.
No. Just to clarify, Mr. Bayliss, I thought a moment ago you were offering not before 8 a.m. on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Right. So yes. It's 7:30 Monday to Friday, 8. Right. Okay, that's what you're offering. Thank you. Yeah. A further question, Ms. Jane Deal.
can I just make a comment? You do not need daily milk deliveries. Milk lasts much more than 24 hours in a fridge.
Thank you. Right. Are there any further questions? No.
Ms. Titcombe has a hand raised.
So yes.
Miss Titcombe has a hand raised, I
Oh,
believe.
right. Okay. Yes, Miss Titcombe.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was my my mouse going over the wrong bit. Sorry, my apologies.
Okay. Right. If that's the end of questions, and we will have a discussion later about possible conditions were it grant. Perhaps we could hear from the objectors in the order that they have offered, which is Mr. Pearson goes first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for chairing everything. So yes, obviously I represent Victoria Gardens and all the residents in our street, which as it stands is a very quiet cul-de-sac. And the problem that we have is obviously with a large hotel compared to what it was before, the increase in deliveries, we're anticipating, I think I've heard the number of sort of 18 plus delivery trucks, whether it's food or laundry or whatever it might be at the rear, and they're turning around in the turning circle. That rear area, the tall buildings, the apartment building there, it magnifies anything, any sound that goes on in that area, and it kind of magnifies it and bounces it into all of the rear of all our houses on Victoria Gardens. So the turning noises of those trucks, because they all have to legally have the sort of beeping or whatever you want to call it, when they are going to reverse in this turning circle, is loud. And if is going to start at 7:30 every morning and 8 o'clock at the weekends, you can imagine how noisy it's going to be. So I obviously have an issue with particularly the hours in the morning. 7:30 at night during the week is absolutely fine, and I would accept that. But 7:30 in the morning for all deliveries and bottling out as well is just too early, considering how many trucks are going to be coming up and down those lanes. And I don't see why it couldn't be a bit later. And as a fellow neighbour just mentioned, the milk and other such goods do keep for days, so they don't have to be delivered first thing in the morning. They could be delivered the evening before. So that's one point. For me, a lot of it is about my issues, and all the residents of Victoria Gardens. The issues are about noise and public nuisance created by a hotel, which essentially, having looked at all the other hotels that they have, one in the UK on South Bank and the others around Europe, they are appealing to a young crowd of, I would say 20 to 30-year-olds. It looks a bit like a Soho House chain, but it's probably a lean Soho House, where it's going to attract young people who will want to drink 24/7 if they're allowed. And I think in a residential area, this is absolutely a no-go for all of us. It's not that we don't want people to be able to, have drinks with their meals, but business meetings that go on till 1, 2, 3 in the morning are not really business meetings any longer. Business takes place in business hours. And so I think it's really important that the councillors, you take into account the residential side of the back of the hotel and what something like a 24/7 drinking policy over the whole ground floor of a hotel will create. It'll create smokers who will want to be out walking around. They'll walk around the back and they'll smoke around the back, and it'll be very hard for the hotel to control that sort of thing. Are they going to have someone 24/7 on the door, manning that whole area? What are they going to do about all of that? So I think it's important that all of those sorts of things are considered. And for me, it's the public nuisance created by such licensing hours, and also the associated smoking. So it's appreciated that that some of the conditions that have been added, 7:30 p.m., but it has to be the morning hours need to be reduced. 8:30 a.m. would be acceptable in the week, I think, and I think others would agree. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I mean, Sunday, normally the hours deliveries, I think, are between 10 and 12. So to ask for a 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. on a Sunday for deliveries and bottling and all such like is just not acceptable. Again, on a Saturday, the hours need to be minimised. So I think you can understand, given the style of hotel. I mean, they on one of their websites, it states, located in the heart of the city, we want an easygoing bar that is open 24/7. That's stated on their website. And they also state Marshall guitar amps in each hotel bedroom, which is a rather large speaker that looks like a Marshall amp where you can plug your phone in to listen to music. So you've got 150 rooms, potentially partying with speakers in their rooms, having drinks 24/7. You know, you can start to see, you know, what sort of clientele that the hotel is applying for. And I was young once, I'm not that old now. And so I understand where that potentially could go to. So I think we need to nip it in the bud and be sensible here as to how the license should be granted. As I say, I speak on behalf of all of those for Victoria Gardens. And the bottling, obviously the bottling and the noise of the bottles and all of that is very loud. We had that issue with Marks and Spencer's, who used to, with their trolleys, they used to wheel them around the back, and the squeaking noise of those trolleys with the food made such a noise that we had to go to the council and complain. And eventually they started to do their deliveries on the front, which made a huge difference. So here we're talking about all deliveries going around the rear, and it's a very quiet cul-de-sac, and I can't emphasize that enough. Those are really my main issues, and I think I speak for everybody else. And I think, considering the style of hotel, it's very important that we, nip it in the bud and deal with this 24-hour drinking policy, which is just an absolute no-go. I mean, I think there needs to be at least, hours off in the middle of the night where there is no alcohol being served, to stop potentially what could become a party destination that is open for 24 hours a day and in a residential area. You know what I mean? It's just something that we really, really need to think hard and strong about. So those are my main concerns, really. And I'll let the others talk after me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sorry, could we hear from Mrs. Everett next?
Yes, sorry. Thank you. Right. I'm speaking on behalf of all of the residents of Bulmer Mews. We too share this service road, although it's fair to say that the likes of Victoria Gardens, and Sebastian could correct me, but they are probably, if you parked two cars side by side, you would be at the front door of Victoria Gardens and the rear alleyway. So they are incredibly close. We're slightly further away. I think, to me, welcome the concessions, although I think some of them were very late in the day, and I think it's a shame there was no conversations despite our offering. But I think, to me, I share Sebastian's great concern, which is this element of 24-hour drinking. So if you look at the whole stretch of Notting Hill Gate, there is not a 24-hour licence here. And actually, by its nature as a hotel, it is going to be operating 24 hours a day, unlike restaurants and other items that shut down. So in fact, even if you look at the licensing hours in that stretch, none of them are open until midnight, except I think the odd supermarket till 11:30 or 11. But I think what you've got here is something that actually is going to really take off in the evenings and become a destination. I think this whole definition of off sales being allowed anywhere in the property is actually what is the most concern. If it really is 24 hours of room service, then that's fine. That should be restricted to the guests of the hotel, not their bona fide visitors. Because frankly, those are the people that are going to create the noise. They're the ones that are going to leave drunk. They're going to potentially, if they live nearby, they're going to nip down the back alley. If they've parked their car, even if they're not drunk, they're going to nip down the back alley because that's where the residential car parking is, rather than on the main thoroughfare. So actually what you've got is you've got the element of this license application that is causing the biggest concern to all the residents is this element of bona fide guests drinking or being entitled to drink 24/7. And actually, this is just going to become like Sanderson's down in Oxford Street, where it becomes a destination trendy hotel. I did, by the way, look at the licensed area, and when you count to the right of, if you go back to page 21 of the plans, on the right of the area, that is 92 tables and chairs. I've ignored the individual seats to the right. So, and then there's a further 8 seats at the bar. So in fact, if you then count the areas to the left of the area, that's 85 tables and chairs. So actually, if you add it all up, as a conservative estimate, you're at 180, if I can do my maths, 85, if not 190 plus seating. So for me, all you need to do is you get 1 or 2 members of a rugby club staying in this hotel, and you can get the whole rugby club drinking 24/7 in that bar. And when the rugby club all go to leave, that's where you get the public nuisance. In fact, if not the throwing up outside and the drunkenness. I would also like to just move on to a few other items. As Sebastian mentioned, M&S has taken its 6:30 a.m. lorry from the front. There is no reason why this hotel could not take its deliveries from the front on the weekends in particular, literally running some bread, some croissants and fresh milk through the front. You know what? That would be well appreciated, and it's not impossible, as Marks & Spencer's has proved for many years. I also want to talk about the conditions, because I find condition 8, that alcohol may be supplied for consumption on premises from the ground floor bar and residence. I just look at that and I go, a restaurant. I say, well, where else is it going to provide? Why? And Heidi Titcombe, as your lawyer, can give you advice. I don't understand may, because may implies they may not. Similarly, condition 9, off sales of alcohol should be limited to hotel guests who may take their drinks to the bedroom for consumption. Well, actually, if it's true bedroom service, then it really should be in their bedrooms. And then no drinks in condition 10 should be outside the hotel whatsoever. So in fact, I don't really understand why even the bar and restaurant up until 11 o'clock, why that needs to even be an off license. I would have thought that could surely be an on-premises license from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. and the other hours. I will leave my neighbours to talk about the rubbish, the deliveries and the hours. I genuinely believe that for the sake of the residents, and please don't underestimate, there is Ivy Lodge, there's Gate Hill Court. So right on that far boundary on the western end, that is Gate Hill Lodge. If you go above the alleyway on the right, that is all Ivy Lodge. If you go behind, there's residential behind where you can see some of the governments. You can see, I don't think you can quite see it on the plans. Thank you for this plan that you're just showing up. Residential along Notting Hill Gate above all the shops, residential to the left of the site, residential to the right, residential behind. Please, please bear in mind that there is no other 24-hour license in this area of Notting Hill whatsoever, hotel or otherwise, and actually it should not be granted to allow bona fide guests who, frankly, unless the hotel resident is paying and only paying on their room card and with their card, there is no way of proving who a bona fide guest is. And frankly, it's all money in the hotel's pockets. So thank you very much, everybody. Happy to answer questions.
Yes, thank you. Could we hear now from Jane Deal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really, I'm going to reiterate a lot of what Sebastian and Joanne have said, but what I want to do is concentrate on the issue of the use of the service road behind. This new hotel, as Joanna has pointed out, is going to be very much part of the community that is Notting Hill Gate. It's surrounded by residential buildings and streets, so it would be nice to think that the operators of this hotel will want to build a good relationship with us locals and to be a positive addition to the area. But unfortunately, this licensing application, as you can see, has just raised antibodies in all of us and currently only serves to alienate us as neighbours. The service road, Bulmer Place, which is behind the hotel, has become increasingly busy over the last 10 years or so, as many of the premises on Notting Hill Gate have been converted from shops into restaurants and retail food outlets, and trading hours have increased. And in line with these changes in use, we have experienced an exponential increase in the number of delivery lorries to service these outlets, and this will worsen with the additional traffic that is proposed to service the hotel. In the planning permission, Frogmore estimated that there would be 9 deliveries per day to the hotel to service its needs. Now, the problem with 9 deliveries in Bulmer Place is because it only has one entrance and exit. 9 deliveries equates to 18 journeys up and down the road, and every lorry that comes into Bulmer Place has to turn round right by Victoria Gardens, which, as Councillor Schmetterling and Sebastian have pointed out, means the use of reversing indicators and noise every time. The thought of this noise going on at 7:30 in the morning is just horrible for the residents. And as Sebastian has pointed out, the sound travels up and down Bulmer Place and is easily hearable by all the residences that are around, certainly us in Bulmer Mews and those in Victoria Gardens. We are therefore very concerned that the proposal that these deliveries are going to start at 7:30 in the morning and go on to 7:30 in the evening, particularly at the weekend. Currently, there is an agreement which has been in place since 2004 for the use of the service road, which the vast majority of the premises on Notting Hill Gate abide by. This is that they cannot start before 7:30 in the morning, Monday to Friday, and they must finish at 8:30 Monday to Friday. But at the weekend, they finish at 6:30 on Saturdays, and on Sundays, deliveries and collections are only allowed between 10 and 12. These hours currently give 78 hours over a week in which premises can service their needs, which must surely be enough for all of the businesses that exist. Separate to the issue of deliveries and rubbish collections, there's also the issue of the deposition of bottles and cans outside the premises. When Polpo was in existence, looking at that plan that's up on the screen at the moment, it was at about number 134 Notting Hill Gate. They used to throw out their bottles from the bar when they finished their service late at night. That is a time when the streets to the rear of Notting Hill Gate are relatively quiet, and the sound of bottles being chucked into a bin could be heard by everyone in the area. We would hate to see this happening again with the hotel. Hence, we would be keen that throwing out bottles to the rear of the hotel didn't start until 8:30 in the morning and stopped by 9 o'clock at night. Otherwise, all the families who are trying to get their children to sleep, and those of us who are getting more elderly and like to get our beauty sleep as well, will have very disturbed nights. We therefore look to the licensing committee to place some reasonable conditions on the use of the service road at the rear, both in terms of deliveries and rubbish collections, but also the question of chucking out the bottles and cans from the premises. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Schmetterling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got some suggestions for conditions besides just making my sort of statement. May I present the conditions, suggested conditions first or afterwards? How would you prefer?
I don't mind.
Okay, well, let's start off with the conditions then. And that's to deal with the points that the speakers before me have raised. Because I don't think these have been specifically addressed in the suggested conditions so far, or even the ones I put forward. So 1, steps shall be taken to prevent patrons or potential patrons from congregating on the highway or in the private alley on the eastern flank of the premises between Notting Hill Gate and Bulmer Place, or from causing noise and nuisance to residents living in the vicinity of the premises. 2, and there's 4 of them. 2, the premise, sorry, I also want to say, of course, the legal team, if they get accepted in principle, obviously the wording can be changed to make them fit properly. 2, the premises license holder shall ensure that no noise or vibration associated with the operation of plants at the premises and the entire building shall give rise to a nuisance to the occupiers of neighbouring properties. 3, the premises license holder shall ensure that no music shall be played within the premises and the entire building so as to give rise to nuisance within neighbouring dwellings. And finally, 4, the premises license holder shall ensure that no independent sound system shall be brought onto the premises and used for entertainment so as to give rise to nuisance to occupiers in neighbouring dwellings. So that's the suggested conditions, which I hope would address also the issue that Mr. Pearson raised about the sound systems in the rooms. Now, what I feel in general is this. I have to say, first of all, that I'm disappointed not to see Mr. Struck here, the CEO of Ruby Hotels, or indeed a suitable representative. This is a major development. It's a major licensing. It's a licensing application for a major premises in a residential area. And I find it a bit surprising that we have a representative who, in the form of Mr. Bayliss, who's not been able to give definitive answers on certain things, such as he believes or apparently, which is all very well, but we here are dealing with the here and now, even if the license may, whatever license is granted, if it's granted, that it may come up for variation. So this is a disappointment, I have to say. And it seems that Mr. Struck does not understand the geography of this hotel, according to what Mr. Bayliss has told us. And Mr. Bayliss has talked about, and of course it's correct, I accept that. And I told Mr. Bayliss that yesterday, and Ms. Titcombe confirmed it, that a licensing hearing has nothing to do with planning. However, this is a major building, and the license and the planning application, the planning permission should inform, at least inform the license application, because it gives the license applicant an idea of what the local people think. And this is why I found it also a bit disappointing that after my discussion with Mr. Bayliss yesterday, he on the hours of bottling out and so on, that he comes back and with hours which don't make much progress, make a little bit of progress, I grant, but doesn't make much progress towards what is needed. And as Mrs. Johnson has pointed out, you don't need daily deliveries of things like milk, and especially if you get these special milks which last for 2 or 3 weeks and they're not sterilized either. So this is my point, that this application as it stands does not reflect what is needed in the area. I understand that hotels like this would like 24-hour service, but it's room service, and I think the committee should not grant 24 hours anywhere in the hotel. As I wrote in my objections, we see no reason for not having 24-hour room service. The drinking hours in the public areas should stop at 22:30 because the planning application allows 2300, so that's the usual half-hour drinking up time. So that would be fine. I mean, that's like every other restaurant and pub. And the whether we call the rooms on site, I made a point of trying to define them as on site. I suppose it's more important that it's defined if it's off sales to be in the room only. I think the committee should reject 24-hour drinking anywhere in the hotel, regardless of who they are. And I do support the idea that after the 22:30 cutoff, that the only people who should be able to buy drinks, regardless of for whom, are hotel guests. So this is a really a difficult thing here, and basically, please grant the license only on the condition. I'd like to also add another thing about Mr. Baylis's comment on his not knowing what the planning application says. He did have a chance tomorrow to look at it, to look at the rooms, and I had confirmation from Frogmore this morning that there should be retail. They even described to me the premises of what they should look like. The retail unit should be. It actually sounded quite attractive, I must say. But Frogmore did say there should be retail. And so my question to Mr. Baylis also is, why is this being ignored? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So it's time for questions from the committee. My first question, I think, is addressed to the residents, which is, as things are at the moment, what is the earliest that delivery lorries come down the service road? We were talking about A, Mondays to Fridays, and B, at weekends. So would somebody like to help me with that?
So if you ignore, Joanna Everett here, if you ignore the odd rogue vehicle that arrives, and it is fair to say there is the odd rubbish truck or something else earlier, nothing before 7:30 during the weekdays, and on Sundays later. It is fair to say that we would prefer later on all those days, and I think Victoria Gardens suffers the worst. I have historically got out of bed and had to go around and tell people to turn off the refrigerated lorries when they've arrived very, very early because they're working hard.
But at weekends, you say it's later. How much later? Because there was reference to...
On Sunday, historically, it is 10 o'clock. So Tesco's has 10 o'clock on its liquor license, and right. they occasionally they have a lorry that will arrive at 9:30 and sit outside.
Yeah, so I think Sundays is 10 to 12, I think, are the hours currently for everybody in the Mews. Saturdays, can anyone clarify what exactly the Saturday hours currently?
Saturday hours currently are 7:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
And can I, sorry, Chair, could I just add to those hours? Obviously, as we are talking about an extra 9 vehicles coming in and then 9 vehicles leaving, it's a lot more traffic for a very small Mews, and the hours are 7:30 in the morning. It would also, by making it a bit later for all of these trucks, they wouldn't all be trying to come in at 7:30 in the morning to get their deliveries. And often delivery trucks, as we all know, they start early, so they like to come early. And so, you know, by staggering it, it might be a sensible decision on that basis as well.
Okay, thank you. Right. I have a point to put to Councillor Schmetterling concerning some of his suggested conditions. As we are not being asked to grant any sort of license for the bedrooms, how can I don't see how we can control what goes on in the bedrooms other than alcohol purchased on the premises.
Well, this is, I suppose, difficult. It's a good question, Chair. I suppose it's a matter of how one approaches this license, whether also bearing in mind what one of the residents, I think it was Mrs. Johnson said, but maybe not, that you don't need, but also my contention is you don't need off sales. You just define the on sales as the public areas as mentioned, and the bedrooms. So that way you'd simplify the process as well.
But I would point out to you, because I raised this with Mr. Bayliss, that they have not applied for whatever reason for a license for the bedrooms, and therefore we have to consider the application before us. Yes, we could restrict it to on sales, in which case no alcohol supplied could be taken into the bedrooms. But as I say, that we have the application before us. Right. Do any other members of the committee have questions?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, could I just say, well, I think from my point of view, how you define the sales into the bedrooms is perhaps not quite, although I consider it quite important, but it's more important that the applicant has in fact has clarified that it's not that it's off out of the public areas, it's into the bedrooms, but that leaves the concern of this 24-hour drinking in the public areas, and I'm really concerned about that. And the noise in the bedrooms is, well, we'll have to see then. If Mr. Chair, you'll have to decide if there's nothing we can do about the noise in the bedrooms then. But then the conditions would apply to the licensed areas, however defined.
Thank you.
So Joanna Everett here. Is it possible, and maybe your lawyer could comment, is it possible to condition that any off sales beyond a certain time can only be drunk within the curtilage of the hotel and specifically within the bedrooms? So Mr. Bayliss is arguing it can only be drunk within the curtilage of the hotel. So he clearly feels he has some control. Why doesn't he have enough control that he could actually restrict it to bedrooms only? Either it could be delivered up to the bedrooms, but why can't you define it by bedrooms? Because clearly Mr. Bayliss feels this 24-hour off license can be controlled by the hotel. So all we're asking for is a subset of that in bedrooms.
And I'd like to add that I think we're slightly getting away from the point of the 24/7. I think there needs to be a cut-off of alcohol that is sold to, whether it's hotel guests or not. There needs to be a cut-off of a period of time in the middle of the night where there is no alcohol being served and sold, to prevent this 24/7 culture happening here. I think that's very important.
Well, we can address that later. Mr. Tickham, do you have any comment to make on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we can ask Mr. Bayliss to comment, but in terms of a hotel, it is quite normal for the permission to be given to the hotel residents and their bona fide guests. And they do need off sales because the rooms are not within the licensed area. So that's why they need off sales in order to permit them to sell alcohol, to consume alcohol in the bedrooms. I think we can ask Mr. Bayliss to clarify whether he's happy to make any compromises in relation to what the residents have just said, and then the committee can then consider what it wants to do in terms of whether it's going to approve the license or what conditions it will put on the license. So I don't know whether Mr. Bayliss wants to comment a bit further about that.
Yes, if Mr. Bayliss would like to sort of comment now, then we'll return to questions from the members.
Yeah, well, I don't really know how much clearer I can make it. I've tried 3 different ways to say that off sales will only take place to guest bedrooms. The bar will close. I mean, Mr. Pearson raises the prospect of these premises operating every day of the week as some sort of Ibiza beach party for 24 hours a day. It's a hotel. It's a 150 bedroom hotel where guests have got to go to sleep at night. It's not going to be some sort of party venue where people just show up and you cram 200 or 300 people into a bar and they drink till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. This is a hotel where people are. Can I finish, Mr. Pearson, please? And then you can have your say. Where people are paying 150 or 200 pounds a night to sleep in a room.
Craig, can you just clarify, because I thought you did say earlier in the submission that the residents and their bona fide guests would be able to drink in the bar, which of course they would. Are you now thinking of putting a condition on so that the off sales should be limited to the bedrooms only, as opposed to the bar and the rest of the licensed premises from a certain time?
I mean, at the moment, the way that the application is worded is off sales are permitted into guest bedrooms 24 hours a day. So if I'm sitting in my bedroom at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I want a glass of wine while I'm watching the telly, I can phone downstairs and someone will bring me a glass of wine. I don't think that's unreasonable. The bar area itself is licensed permanently. The reason that the bar area is licensed permanently is that drinks have to be brought to guest rooms from the bar itself. So the bar has to be operational at any time that a guest wants a drink in their room.
Right. So the issue is what is to stop a loud party taking place within the bar area at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Well, assuming that the hotel management want that to happen, which is the first hurdle you've got to get over, and my understanding is that it's not that sort of hotel, that would effectively mean that you've got residents inviting their guests to stay in the bar area until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. If you wanted to put a close time on serving alcohol in the bar itself, and I'll pick a time off my head, say 1 o'clock. I don't think 1 o'clock is unreasonable for hotel residents and their bona fide guests to carry on having a drink in the bar or the restaurant after they've had a meal, because the timings we've put in the application for non-residents are 11 o'clock. So non-residents will be off the premises by 11:15, 11:30. So effectively, what I'm offering is a closure of the bar for the ground floor bar area at 1 a.m. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Well, can we return to that? We'll note that and return to it when we look at conditions.
Sure, yeah.
So, okay, I'll return to my fellow panel members and ask them if they have questions for the objectors.
Chairman, I have one question for the residents. And this regards their worries about deliveries into Bolman Mews at the rear. We have a lot of hotels in Earl's Court, and we had a scheme in Earl's Court where we were encouraging the hotels to try to coordinate all their deliveries within certain hours, and also to only use electric vehicles. Now that may be possible because there is going to be a sort of a management condition. Deliveries and collections shall only take place in accordance with the servicing, delivery and management plan approved by the planning authority. So it may be that we can suggest a condition there. I don't know if it's in the licensing regime or the planning regime. And also, you know, on vehicles reversing in a very enclosed residential mews area, we have the same in Earl's Court. Vehicles don't have to have an audible alarm when reversing. The HSE are quite clear that you can also use a visible warning, i.e. a flashing orange lights. And that possibly planning could build into the servicing conditions. It may be planning does it, but I suppose my question is to the residents, do they think that sort of thing would alleviate some of the worst of the problems, electric vehicles, coordinated deliveries and visual warnings? And Ms. Titcombe perhaps could confirm whether those are best done as planning conditions or as licensing conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes. In terms of the planning conditions, well, my understanding is planning has already been granted, and that would already specify the conditions which are attached to this particular development. So planning would not then be able to attach further conditions because they've already got the permission. So this committee is entitled to attach conditions to the licence which are proportionate and relevant to the licensing objectives. I don't think you could impose a condition that they only have electric vehicles. I do think you can have a condition to say that deliveries shouldn't happen between certain hours. So you can look at the hours. I'm not sure about whether we can impose a condition that they should only have flashing lights, but we can certainly look at that. And Mr. Bayliss may have a comment on that.
I would just add that to my knowledge, and somebody may be able to confirm or correct me, the planning condition was the servicing plan be agreed, and that has yet to be agreed. At least there's nothing on the website.
Yes, so if that's the case, then planning can deal with the service delivery plan, which is often something that's dealt with sort of later on in the development. I understand this is not going to start for a year or two, so they don't finalise those plans until immediately before or in fact sometimes during the development. So that is something that can be done under planning.
Sorry, could I just comment? It's Joanna Everett. I spoke at that planning hearing about exactly that plan and the fact that there was no electric vehicles, there was no consolidation. In fact, the approach taken by the council was to get everything off Notting Hill Gate. So at the moment, the draft plan that we have seen is inadequate in that respect. Councillor Spalding, it does not reflect any of the TfL suggestions about amalgamating journey times or anything. So disappointing, but maybe there's hope in the future.
Chair, that reminds me that during the submissions, one of the residents suggested that the deliveries on a Saturday and Sunday could be done at the front of the premises. I think we should ask Mr. Bayliss whether he has any views about that.
Yes. Mr. Bayliss?
No views. No views, because as I say, I haven't been involved on the planning side of things. So I'm going to leave that matter entirely open to the committee. If they think that's an appropriate way of dealing with it, then so be it. I have no strong views either way.
Thank you.
Can I just say, in relation to Heidi's suggestion about a condition in relation to flashing lights and vehicles beeping when they reverse, I get it completely. I understand the issue completely. The difficulty I've got is, if that's a condition on a license, that means my clients are responsible for their suppliers' delivery vehicles effectively being fitted out in a certain way. And I don't think that's a condition which they could comply with. It would be an unreasonable condition for them to specify to drivers they must only have a certain type of vehicle.
That is my view as well, actually.
Thank you. Did Councillor Schmetterling wish to respond on this particular point? He's got his hand up. No. Right.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, sorry. Oh, you have to give 5 seconds to find the microphone and get the mouse over there. I wanted to respond, if I may, or I can do it later, to Mr. Bayliss's hours comments. Is that possible?
Might
his
be
offer of 1 a.m. His offer of 1 a.m. That's what I want to comment on, but I can do it later, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I think so. Again, does Mr. Pearson want to respond on Councillor Spalding's question?
Yes, I would like to respond on the Saturday and Sunday deliveries being at the front, rather like M&S has done for the past many years. I think that would be a welcome condition for the residents all at the rear in Victoria Garden.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Spalding, do you have any further questions? No. Councillor Healy has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to go back to the deliveries question. The residents said, the objectors rather, it said in answer to a question from you, Chair, that at the moment the earliest deliveries arrive at the back of the building is nothing before 7:30 a.m. That's what has been offered by Mr. Bayliss today for weekday deliveries. Is that not acceptable to you?
Right, who's going to answer that?
It's Jane Johnson here. I mean, from the Bulmer Mews point of view, that's what we have lived with since 2004. I think the early deliveries, particularly with the turning issue, is much more pertinent in terms of Victoria Gardens. And can I just also confirm what you said, Chair, that the whole hours of service of the hotel weren't actually decided at planning. That is a battle yet to come. Thank you.
Mr. Pearson?
Yes, if I may raise my hand. Yes, my suggestion was that 8:30 in the morning, as opposed to 7:30, because of the extra amount of vehicles that will be coming specifically to the hotel. It would just start to stagger all the deliveries suddenly trying to arrive at 7:30 in the morning. So it might make sense on that point, which I made earlier.
Right. Okay. I think what will happen is when we return to looking at possible conditions, we will just clarify what the positions are of the different parties.
Could I just ask, sorry, Joanna Everett, just on those hours, I know we're focusing on the morning hours, but actually the evening hours on the weekends, 6:30 on Saturday and noon on Sunday, those really are the days when you're out in your garden or you've got family time and the background noise is so considerably less. So please don't just focus on 7:30 in the evening every night, because those weekends are precious, 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 precious to us, please.
Thank you very much. Councillor Healy, any further questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor Spalding, any further questions? No? Right.
No, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Tickham, do you have any questions?
Not of the objectors. I just wanted to go through the conditions with the bailiff.
Come to that in a moment. Right. I think then we will turn to possible conditions, and obviously in the application and subsequently Mr. Bayliss has offered some conditions, so we'll start with those and then look at the other issues raised. So I'm going to actually ask Miss Titcombe to consider this. As I say, we haven't made a decision whether indeed to grant a license or not. And we're not going to, it's not like planning where we sometimes negotiate a position, but we try to understand everyone's positions, and sometimes we do reach agreement. So can I pass over to Ms. Titcombe?
Thank you very much. Craig, I just need to go through the conditions, because if the committee are minded to grant the licence, we need to make sure that any conditions which are attached are correctly drafted and are enforceable, as you know. I just have one or two comments in relation to condition 2. I wonder, Isabel, if you could just move that, thank you, slightly up. That's great. So I just wondered if I could tweak the wording of that CCTV condition to say that it shall be installed, and that it has to be installed before licensable activities are provided. And then I wanted to remove the sentence which starts, the CCTV system shall be updated and maintained according to when the premises are open to the public, because of course in this, as it's a hotel, there will be residents on the hotel, so the police will want to be able to identify residents if they cause any problems which are contrary to the licensing objective. So I wondered, are you happy for me to remove the line, the CCTV system shall be updated and maintained according to when the premises are open to the public? It's in the first.
Very happy. Very happy. This was a standard condition I got from Ian Davis. In fact, I asked him for any conditions he wanted before I drafted the application, so he sent that over to me. So if you want to amend it, very happy with that.
Okay, and turning to the next condition, which relates to number 3, concerning.
That's another one of his.
I think these things are always updated. I would just suggest altering the first part of the condition, because at the moment it refers to signs of intoxication and procedures. So I would suggest altering it to all staff responsible for selling alcohol shall receive initial training in the requirements of the Licensing Act, the offences which may be committed under the Act, and the conditions of the licence. The training shall be refreshed every 6 months, and then it continues, records of the training shall be retained. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, very happy with that. Again, this was one of Ian's, so I'm happy for you to amend as you want it.
Okay, I've got no comments regarding conditions 3, 4 and 6. So then moving on to number 7, which is your Challenge 25 policy. I would suggest a slightly broader condition, saying the premises shall operate a Challenge 25 age verification policy, and staff shall be trained in respect of the policy. Staff shall ask for proof of age from anyone they suspect of being less than 25 years of age. The only acceptable forms of identification shall be a photo style driving licence, a passport, a photo identification card bearing the PASS logo in a hologram format, military ID or recognised photo ID from member countries of the European Union. Is that okay?
Yeah, very happy with that.
Thank you. In terms of condition 8, subject to what the members do, this condition may need to be changed because it says alcohol may be supplied for consumption on the premises on the ground floor and restaurant bar. I think the objectors wanted to limit that from a certain time in the evening to say that the residents or their bona fide guests or just their residents couldn't spend all evening drinking there. And I note that you've suggested that a 1 a.m. cut-off time may be appropriate. Would you suggest that 1 a.m. cut-off time is between 1 a.m. and say 10 o'clock the next day or 7 o'clock the next day?
Yeah, I think you could reword it to say alcohol shall not be supplied for consumption on the premises from the ground floor bar and restaurant between 0100 and 0700 the following day.
Okay. That's helpful. In terms of condition 9, I'd like to add, first of all, when you refer to hotel guests, do you mean residents and their bona fide guests?
Yeah.
Okay. And this also needs to be amended so that you've got the reference of may take their drinks to their bedrooms for consumption. I think that may need to be altered to make sure that after 11 o'clock, they should be taking their drinks to their rooms as opposed to staying in the bar. Although I suppose
You mean after 0100?
Yeah. Because we've now covered it in 8. Okay, I'll alter that accordingly. And I think you've also said in correspondence that no alcohol shall be permitted to be taken outside the hotel. So I can insert that in there or in appropriate place.
Yeah, I thought my condition 10 was more comprehensive than that, but if you want to use alcohol, that's fine.
So can we just pause and sort of how might that read now?
Well, my current condition 10 says simply no drinks or glassware taken outside, which includes alcohol and soft drinks.
Okay, that's fine. Would you be prepared to extend that slightly to, or in the service road to the rear of the premises?
Absolutely, yes. No
And we might need to refer to the alleyway because there is also this alleyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem with that at all.
Okay, that's fine.
Or just say outside the premises.
Well, I think for the objectors' comfort, they want to make sure that residents or anyone who's drinking from the hotel are not drinking in these other areas.
Sure, okay.
Go back to condition 9. It says hotel guests. Does that include bona fide guests of residents? I think we need clarification.
Yes,
that was the intention, Chair. I mean, I can think of certain circumstances where I'm staying in a hotel and I might want someone to go to my room with me for a drink. Let's not go any further than that, but that would cover that scenario.
But if it was just the sale, you could say the sale, it doesn't prevent consumption by guests, but the sale could only be to hotel residents.
Oh yes, absolutely, yes. Right. I've no
off sales of alcohol should be limited to hotel residents.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stop them taking guests into their rooms.
No.
Right. I wondered if, as this was one of the areas of contention, if any of the residents had any comments to make on those possible conditions.
Let me, Sebastian Pearson. Yes. I'm just slightly confused as to so from 1 o'clock, Mr. Bayliss is saying no alcohol shall be served to anybody, hotel guests or their bona fide guests. Is that what he's suggesting? So at 1 o'clock in the morning, is it cut off until 7 o'clock in the morning for alcohol sales completely?
In the bar, yeah.
In the bar, but you're still saying it's a 24/7 policy in the bedrooms?
Yes.
I think to be clear, it's the bar and the restaurant on the ground floor.
Sorry, Heidi, yes, you're right.
I thought can I just clarify? Sorry, Joanna Everett. I thought the restaurant had its own on-site license, which was finishing at 23 hours. So could we leave the restaurant out of that? I think that was already being controlled by the on-site license that was running till 2300 hours. If not, we've suddenly got a 1 o'clock restaurant here. How do we do that?
Yes. The whole of the ground floor should operate until 1 a.m.
Why? Nothing else in Notting Hill Gate operates beyond midnight. What is so special about this hotel that your restaurant is now moving from opening hours of shutting at 11 o'clock at night and suddenly shutting at 1 o'clock at night?
It shuts at 11 o'clock for non-residents. After 11 o'clock, only people staying in the hotel can stay in the restaurant or the bar.
Sorry, a bona fide guest is a non-resident. What am I missing?
As the application stands, the applicant has asked for the bar and the restaurant to be used 24 hours a day. So Craig has offered the concession to cut those hours back for residents and their hotel guests, bona fide guests, to 1 o'clock. That's separate to members of the public who have to leave at 11 o'clock at night.
But there is no restaurant in Notting Hill Gate that operates until 1 o'clock. And a bona fide guest is not a hotel resident.
Right. I mean, I think we have clarified what is being offered now by Mr. Bayliss, and we clarified the position of the residents. Then we'll have to make a decision.
Yes,
May I
am
say
still
something?
questioning why this is allowed. This is going to come in under the wire through the back door as being allowed a 1 o'clock restaurant here, which is essentially what this would happen.
Well, okay, I mean, we understand your position.
May I now come in with my response to Mr. Baylis's offer of 1 o'clock, 1 a.m.?
Yes.
Yeah. This is, I mean, I must say this has become yet again, I also became confused again with some of this discussion with the closing time of 2300. But let's say the committee is minded to grant this application with certain conditions attached. What I think we should consider is that this council has a midnight policy, and if the committee is minded to grant the license, that the drinking in the public areas should be confined to midnight, in line with the policy, and that means it's effectively sales close at 11:30 because you have a half-hour drinking up time. And that is what I would like to say. So it's nice to know that finally we understand perhaps a bit better what was intended, which was 24-hour drinking in the public areas, which I must admit I hadn't understood. I mean, to hotel guests, and hotel guests must buy these things. But if you're minded to grant extension of these hours to hotel residents, then please finish it at 12, drinking up time from 11:30 onwards. Thank you very much.
I concur.
Thank you. Mr. Bayliss, I think Councillor Schmetterling is suggesting you will be familiar with our normally midnight policy, that instead of 0100 to 0700, it's 12 o'clock. Sorry, it's midnight to 0700.
Yes, with drinking up time. So that means alcohol sales stop at 11:30 p.m.
That's for the
like
ground
every other
floor.
bar and restaurant.
Obviously, we're not talking about residents taking drinks to their rooms.
Correct.
Yes, Chair, I hear what's said. The difference is this isn't, after 11 o'clock, this isn't a public restaurant. Effectively, after 11 o'clock, when non-residents are required, cannot be sold alcohol again. The only people who are remaining in the premises are hotel guests and their bona fide guests, which will be a minimal number of people. So I don't understand why a hotel guest can't stay in the hotel and continue to eat and drink until 1, because there will be no nuisance created outside. So I'm going to maintain the 1 a.m. request.
Right. Okay. I think we understand everyone's positions on that. So if we may, I think we've dealt with conditions 9 and 10. And so if Ms. Chickham could resume with condition 11.
Yes, certainly. So in terms of condition 11, there's a reference to ancillary breakfast or brunch. Should we change that definition to table meal?
Yeah, Heidi, if you want, I'm happy, whatever you want. It's designed to demonstrate that it's not an alcoholics paradise, and you can't just come in the morning for a drink. You've got to have something to eat as well.
Okay, that's fine. And in terms of rubbish or bottles or cans, I noticed there has been some discussion about that. So it'll be for the members to decide what hours they consider appropriate, both for depositing rubbish, including bottles and cans outside, and also for deliveries, and whether the deliveries and collections are going to be always at the rear of the property, or whether they're on a Saturday and Sunday, whether they should change to the front of the building. In terms of potential other conditions that the committee may want, they may want a requirement that all members of public, which I'm differentiating between residents and bona fide guests, should have actually left the premises by 11 o'clock, which is the hours that you're requesting the licence for. Would you be happy with a condition to that effect?
I'd say 11:30, on the basis that if you were looking at it as a normal pub, they'd be entitled to sell until 11 with half-hour drinking up time. So, all non-residents to have vacated the premises by 23:30. 2300 on Sunday.
No, normally I would agree, but the application hasn't been advertised on that basis. So normally there's a half an hour drinking up time. So the hours for on sales would be 10:30 and then 30 minutes drinking up. So they're off by 11. The other way that the committee could do it is to have them coterminous so that they have to leave by 11 o'clock, and it's up to the management to manage the premises so that they ensure all members of the public are have in fact left the premises by 2300 hours.
The coterminous option would be my preference if that's the road you're going to advise the committee down.
Okay, that's fine. In terms of the rear courtyard, service yard, there was a bit of concern about the possibility of patrons of the hotel, and I'm using the term patrons to cover residents, the bona fide guests and members of the public, and also staff, not smoking outside, using that rear door to smoke in the service area. And I wonder if you'd be prepared to agree to a condition that they can't smoke outside there between at all, because that is something that you've indicated in the submission. They can obviously, is a fire exit, so they can obviously go out there at a certain if they need to use it as an emergency, but they shouldn't generally be out the rear side.
No, I'm very happy with that. When I spoke to the chief exec yesterday, he wanted me to be at pains to point out that no one's going to be using that rear area at all. So happy with that.
Okay, fine.
Could I just ask a little bit about the smoking, which hasn't really been talked about, and the conditions to the smoking?
Yes.
Where Mr. Bayless suggests that everyone who is going to be smoking smokes, because it's obviously there's the rear exit door, which I understand is not going to be used, but that doesn't specify anything to do with the alleyway, which is where everyone currently smokes, or at the back there's a whole big area where people stand underneath the tree and smoke and flick their cigarette butts on the floor. So it's, it could create a lot of people mulling around outside. So how are they going to control that? Because obviously smoking goes along with drinking.
Well, the members could impose a condition to say that all smokers, including staff, have to smoke at the front of the building. Craig, would you be prepared to agree to a condition to that effect?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that at the outset, actually, when I first started. But yes, I'm very happy with that.
Okay.
I just ask, does smoking now include vaping?
I presume it would.
Could we add the word explicitly then?
Yes, we can add that word. In terms of, there were a few other additional conditions which were mentioned by various parties. I'm just going to check that we've covered them all.
Not yet. From one or two I've put forward, they're not been covered yet. Would you like me to say them again?
Yes, no, I've got those conditions. So the conditions that you suggested were that steps shall not be taken to prevent patrons or potential patrons from congregating on the highway in the private alleyway outside the premises, or from causing noise or nuisance to residents living in the vicinity of the premises. Craig, did you have a view on that one?
Yeah, I can't accept that. It's too vague. What does steps mean? If we take some steps, we think they're reasonable. The residents might not. It's unenforceable.
Okay.
Well, could we say the hotel will prevent patrons? I mean, it's, as I said, these wording isn't precise. If you can see what the thrust of it is, and if you have better wording, say Ms. Titcombe, then that would be, I'm sure that would be acceptable as well. It's basically to stop people hanging around. It might be covered by the smoking angle. I don't know what the residents think.
You could have a monitoring condition there, Craig, rather than steps.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And do you think it should be, how frequent should that monitoring be?
Well, Mr. Pearson might like to comment, especially because that's most directly affected.
No, but I want Craig to.
Oh,
to
sorry.
Comment, to comment on what he considers reasonable.
Well, as I understand it, the concern is that people might congregate in that rear area. I would suggest we cover it by CCTV, and then it'll be monitored internally.
I think this is actually relating to the highway at the front and the private alleyway. Have I got that right, or is that incorrect? Yeah, so it's not the rear. This doesn't relate to the rear.
Well, I think we're also talking about the rear as well, because that's where they might congregate as well. So I think all areas need to be, considered together.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm happy to do it via CCTV. I think it seems the most logical way of dealing with it without having to force a member of staff out every 20 minutes to see if anybody's out there.
I think that would be fine as long as they then reacted. There's some condition where if they see people milling about outside on the CCTV, that they then go and force them to move back inside. Do you know what I mean? So there's something reasonable there.
So essentially monitoring.
Yes. So monitoring.
I mean, the difficulty is they're not police officers. They don't have powers to force people to move. I mean, they can monitor and they can request people not to loiter in a certain area, but they don't have any power to do anything else. It can be very dangerous for staff to get involved in that sort of thing.
Many establishments have dispersal policies without the people concerned being police officers. So I think if one considers it in the context of a dispersal policy, one could find suitable wording.
Yes.
They may be brought back in, or they could, I
struggled to see what the sort of viable condition would look like. I mean, where there are problems, we sometimes require security staff, things like that, but I'm not sure that would be appropriate at this stage here.
I think in terms of legality, I do agree with Craig that there is a limit as to what powers the staff would have to move people along from a public highway, because anyone is entitled to stand in front of a hotel if they wish to do so. I mean, often people go outside to talk on a mobile phone. So that is the difficulty with imposing that type of condition. But obviously the members can think about it and can decide what they wish to do when they're making a determination.
It's Jamie.
May I suggest that?
Can I just make a comment? Isn't this part of the problem that if the temptation is there, then people will indulge in unsocial activity, which the hotel will be powerless to police? So isn't it better to take away the temptation by looking at much, much tighter licensing hours?
And also, may I suggest, with smoking, many premises have a cordoned off area in the front, which is a dedicated smoking area. So it then becomes quite clear that is the area where residents can smoke at the front, that's cordoned off.
That is quite true, but there hasn't been any discussion about a cordoned off area. Craig, did you have a view as to whether it is physically possible to have a cordoned off area for smoking at the front?
Well, the pavement's quite wide there. The difficulty, of course, is it's public highway. So I don't know what you'd feel, Heidi, about the company hiving off part of the public highway.
That is the issue, because if it's not within their own land, there may well be concerns about cordoning off an area. But the members can certainly consider what you've said, and it'll be up to them to decide what they consider appropriate.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Councillor Schmettering, you did also raise a question about off sales. Well, we've considered that, and the members can decide what they wish to do. You then asked for a condition about no noise or vibration associated with the operation of plant. Craig, did you have a view about that condition?
Yeah, I'm happy to accept that.
Okay. The next condition that Councillor Schmettering suggested was the premises licence holder shall ensure no music shall be played within the demised premises so as to give rise to nuisance within neighbouring dwellings. Did you have a view on that?
Happy with that.
Okay.
You'll note we haven't applied for music.
Exactly. I noted that, so I wondered whether you had a view on that.
I can only think he's referring to guests turning the music up too loud in their rooms, but yeah, I'm happy to accept it.
And the last condition that Councillor Schmidt.
Sorry to interrupt there, Ms. Titcombe. I see that Mr. Bayliss is accepting it for the entire building because he mentioned guest bedrooms.
Yeah, there's no problem with that. We don't want our guests to be disturbed by music.
Right. So both of them. Sorry, are you saying also music? Right. So, Ms. Titcombe, perhaps because I did say in the entire building. The issue earlier was that this is a planning matter more than a licensing matter. But if Mr. Bayliss is prepared to accept the wording and the entire building, then maybe we should include that. Thank you.
So I've got that in there. You also requested a condition that no independent sound system shall be brought on the premises and used for entertainment so as to give rise to nuisance to occupiers in neighbouring dwellings. Craig, did you have a view on that?
No problem with that.
Okay. So I think that's all the conditions that were mentioned. Unless anybody else has.
Well, I just wanted to. I know we spent a lot of time on it, but want to clarify the position on the various parties on servicing hours.
I believe the servicing hours suggested are no deliveries or collections after 7:30 in the evening and 7:30 on the following day, Monday to Friday, and no deliveries and collections after 7:30 in the evening and 8 a.m. on Saturday and Sundays. There has been the suggestion by objectors that the Saturday and Sundays, that deliveries and collections could all stop at 6:30 in the evening and 12 noon on Sunday. Craig, did you have a view about that?
Well, I've made my suggestion in terms of hours, and those are my instructions, so I'll stick with that.
Okay. So then that's a matter for the committee to consider.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Also to note the starting times that objectors have submitted.
Particularly at weekends, I think they did.
Yes, it's 8. Well, I suggested 8 o'clock Monday to Saturday start, but Mr. Pearson, I think quite rightly, suggested 8:30 because he's much closer and his children and a whole lot. Thank you.
And then we also discussed Saturday and Sunday possibly looking at deliveries at the front to minimise the impact over the weekend at the rear. So that's something that needs to be taken into consideration too.
Mr. Bayliss, what is your position on that?
Sorry, Chair, I missed that comment.
At the weekends, deliveries before 10 a.m. to take place through the front of the building.
Chair, no. My instructions are laundry deliveries come early, so I'm willing to compromise at 8 a.m., but nothing earlier. But through the front of the building, I don't think that's an issue.
Right. So it's not an issue. So you're happy to?
No. I'm happy with front deliveries.
So what about 10 a.m. on Sundays? Start.
No.
So the deliveries at the rear shall not take place before 10 a.m. on Sundays because you'll be able to go in at the front.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Aren't you saying that there would be no deliveries at the rear on Saturdays and Sundays because they can be dealt with through the front? Can I just have some clarification on that?
It's a difficult one for me, Heidi, because it feels like it's more of a planning issue than a licensing issue in terms of deliveries and servicing, and I don't know enough about the plan. I know that I think there's a planning condition which requires the clients to agree a service delivery plan, and that's because we're still 2 or 3 years away from building the place. That is something which has to be dealt with down the road, and I'm reluctant to get into that level of detail at a licensing hearing when my gut feel is it's a planning issue, really.
Okay.
I'll leave it to the committee.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's fine.
I think Councillor Healy wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to raise a couple of issues on conditions.
So I can't hear you.
I wanted to raise 2 issues on conditions. One is about the concern that people may congregate at the back of the hotel and the service road. Could this not be sorted by having the back door closed so that people cannot physically leave the hotel to go into the back?
My understanding, it's an emergency exit. So we can say that no one can, can use or go out that door except for in an emergency.
I think we need that. I think we need that. The other issue is we haven't discussed this in any way, but there's clearly a very large amount of concern by residents at the prospect of this hotel and what it might involve. But there's been no indication that the hotel managers have been in touch with residents. So can we have one of the usual conditions about contact with local residents associations and regular contact with them?
Thank you. I think that's a very helpful suggestion. Mr. Bayliss.
Yes, no problem with that condition whatsoever. Standard condition in your borough.
Yep.
Okay.
It's Jane Johnson here. Can I comment that may be a standard condition, but our experience is it rarely happens, and I don't know how you enforce that.
The answer is that if it's not happening, you raise this with the premises, and if they're not responsive, you can complain to our licensing department.
That's right. That's how you deal with it. So I think that brings to an end the conditions.
Okay, I think we probably have enough information now. So unless there are any further points, as I say, there's no summing up. We will be closing the meeting.
It's Jane Johnson here. Can
Yes.
I just raise that you've talked about deliveries at the rear using Bulmer Place, the service road, but you haven't put a specific condition about the throwing out of bottles and cans, which was a separate timing issue.
I think
yes, indeed. We asked for nothing between 2100 and 0830 the following day.
Yes, I noted that, and it was one of the conditions that Craig had mentioned. So it's just really a question of timing.
I'm happy to accept the times that Councillor Schmetterling has proposed.
What's that? 2300 and 0830.
2100.
2100.
It's the bottling out. But I would like to hear Mr. Pearson on that because he's the one most affected by it.
So why would we?
Yes, I mean, my point is why doesn't it not stick with the servicing hours? Why is the bottling out an hour and a half outside of the delivery and servicing hours? Because what we don't want is waste sitting outside all night, encouraging rats or whatever, just kind of and the noise associated with it. So can it not stick within the delivery hours?
Yeah, I'm happy with the delivery hours. I was just responding to Councillor Schmetterling.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hours, you can have the delivery hours.
But no, we said no bottles being chucked out until 8:30 a.m. because that's what you asked. What you mentioned your objection. Whereas delivery hours, I think we're discussing 8 o'clock at the moment as a potential, not 8:30. If it was 8:30, then it was to be the same thing. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
I'm hoping for 8:30 in the morning.
So do we? It seems we have some sort of agreement, but I'm not entirely clear what which is 2100 and what 0830.
I think Mr. Pearson's suggesting 2030 because of the rubbish collections. Is that correct, Mr. Pearson?
No, I think Mr. Pearson is talking about the mornings, and I think
and the night.
evenings.
Right. I think, let's use the 24-hour clock. Mr. Bayliss and objectors, does there seem to be an agreement about the hours being no rubbish, including bottles or cans, to be deposited between 2100 and 0830?
I'm happy with that, Chair.
Right.
I'm happy with that.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think we dealt with conditions as much as we can. Where there's disagreement, we know what the positions are. So with that, I will thank you all for coming, and we will close this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
And members, go back to the pre-meeting.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chairman.
We will now remove all participants from the meeting.